Homeschool moms normalize some really expensive and exhausting habits. And the weird thing is, most of these overconsumption habits really do not make our homeschools better. And in some circumstances, they make them worse. I know this because, of course, I did this too. Until I finally broke free and stopped following the homeschool crowd and started building a homeschool that actually works. This type of thing is exactly what I teach you how to do in my 5-day homeschool rescue plan. The link to that is in the description box and it's completely free. So go ahead and grab that if you already know that you probably have some of these problems and you need some help. But first, let's talk about these 5 expensive things, expensive either with time, with money, or just taking our focus away from what actually matters. And we homeschool moms are normalizing them without really stopping to think if it's what's best. Spending thousands on co-ops. So this is a big one, and I'm not saying that there aren't some really good co-ops out there. Sometimes they're not co-ops, so to speak, which means mom is actually helping to teach classes. Sometimes they are more of like a hybrid school model where the student goes 1 or 2 days a week and has an actual teacher who actually grades and gives feedback and things like that. But what I'm talking about is just spending thousands on this type of thing without really stopping to question what it's giving you in return. Now, if you haven't already watched my video on classical conversations and how I feel about that, you can do that right here. But classical conversations is not the only co-op that I'm talking about here. There are a lot of really low quality co-ops where you are just going to shell out tons and tons of money, and what you get in return is so very, very little. I'm actually a fan of the hybrid model that has the actual teachers who are actual subject matter experts on the topic that they're teaching and who actually grade. There's actually one of these schools in my area, and the organizer of the school does a fantastic job, and the quality of the education that the children receive there is actually really high. And the funny part is a lot of classical conversation students in the area actually end up there once their parents realize that the quality of education that they're receiving at CC is subpar. What I'm trying to say though is you need to take a really hard look at the co-op that you're considering putting your children into, or if your children are already there. You really need to examine the quality. You should sit in 1 or 2 classes. Is the class under control or is it chaotic? Is the teacher allowing things to slide? Does it just seem basically like a public school classroom? If all of these things are true, then honestly, I would run the other way because you are just wasting your money. Your children are not going to be learning very much there. I'm also really not a fan of the whole idea that the teacher is really just a tutor. You know, that's kind of a CC thing, but I've seen it in other co-ops as well, where there's no grading happening. There's no, assignments aren't being turned in. It's really just almost like a facilitator type relationship. I think that in order for something like this to really work, it needs to be a teacher. It needs to be somebody who actually knows what he or she is talking about. And there does need to be feedback in the form of, papers being submitted and graded or tests or things like that. I think that is worth the money that's being spent. I do not think that it's worth it just to have a bunch of kids in a classroom together with one person trying to maintain any sort of order. So, but thousands and thousands. And I mean, I myself have spent thousands and thousands of dollars in this type of situation. And what we ended up getting out of it, well, there just wasn't very much to show for it at all. And, if your child needs more socialization opportunities, there are better ways to do it than shelling out that much money for, basically a social club. There are plenty of ways. These days, there are so many ways that honestly, there's too many ways. So we'll actually be talking about that in one of my other points. And that other point is this point. Point number 2, overscheduling activities. Okay, so this one is going to cost us not only in money, but also in time and really sanity too. Somebody commented on one of my YouTube videos, and I don't remember which one, but she commented that homeschoolers are the busiest people that she knows. And I don't believe that this woman actually homeschooled herself, but she said that homeschoolers are the busiest people that she knows. I'm going to step out on a limb here and say that is actually not a good thing. Overscheduling our children to the point where they don't ever have time to breathe is not a good thing. That is not teaching them to be well-balanced adults. We really need downtime in our lives. And I am saying this as a woman who is literally stepping out of a time period that was way too overscheduled. I myself am not fantastic at saying no to things that I really should say no to. And so, just this last week, it all came to a head and there was just way too much stuff going on. And it is so incredibly stressful. And I am a 43-year-old woman who has lived obviously for 43 years. And so I should know how to handle my own schedule. I should know how to manage my stress levels. But I got to tell you, I was struggling this last week. How much harder is it for our children who are being shuffled from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, with no time to just breathe, no time to be bored. I think it actually is a disservice to our children if they never have the opportunity to be bored. That in itself creates many different opportunities for learning. So overscheduling our children is really just not a fantastic idea. I'm not saying that there should never be any outside activities. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is pick a sport. And it doesn't have to be one sport per child. And, unless you only have 2 children in your family, it shouldn't be one sport per child. Just pick a sport. Your child most likely is not going to aspire to be a professional athlete. Most of our children are not in that 1% group. If your children are, I'm not talking to you. Okay. This video is not for you. It's not to you. So you do not need to get offended. I know that you probably will anyway, but what I'm trying to say is, pick a family sport. In our school, in our homeschool, swimming has been a good one because swimming is also a life skill. And the idea of having my children be really strong swimmers, I feel like that is a good sport. It just makes things so much easier at the beach and things like that. Swimming is great. And the good thing about swimming is while, yes, it is a year-round sport, you don't have to participate in all of the seasons. And you can jump in and jump out if you want to. If your children aren't really there because they want to be, number one or whatever, then you really don't have to be there season after season after season. And that's really how we use it. We just do it occasionally, maybe one season a year. Another sport that we've used throughout the years has been martial arts. Again, that's a life skill. And this is another one where you really don't have to do it year round. You can stop and start as you need to. And there are competitions for that too. So that has been another good one for our family personally. I love music lessons. I love the idea of music lessons. We actually use a lot of virtual music lessons for our children that want to do that. We've done virtual guitar, we've done virtual piano, we've done virtual banjo lessons. I have a child who we just bought a banjo for a few months ago because he was very interested in learning to play banjo, and they all pick it up really, really well. There's some really good programs out there right now where your children can learn without having to go somewhere. If you're already doing a sport, adding music lessons on top of that might feel like too much. So there's plenty of options out there, and I'll link the ones below in the description box that we've personally used for that. But that's a fantastic option. I know that there are, lots of families that have different therapies going on, for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and we have used a speech therapist. We've had a speech therapist who actually comes to our house for the last 2 years. And that has been fantastic. So I would do some calling around and see if you can find a therapist that is willing to come to your home instead of having to go out, because it disrupts the whole school day when you're having to constantly leave, and so then your other children are suffering. I think when we're talking about balance of activities, what we really have to consider here is how it affects the school day. Because in our heads, we can justify, oh, well, I have time for this. But do you have time for that while still giving your child a rigorous education? That's really what it comes down to for me. Is this going to pull me out of the home so that I'm not teaching Johnny math or, whatever? I don't actually have a child named Johnny. So we really have to consider how these activities are going to impact the educational process, because we are home schoolers, not van schoolers or not side of the soccer field schoolers. I'm not saying that that's not okay in a season, but what I'm saying is that I truly believe that children learn best when they have a set schedule, a set structure, and really a set place to do their work. Now, of course, on occasion, I will have my child bring their schoolwork in the car when we have an appointment that's unavoidable or something like that. But, I've done it both ways. I have 11 children. I've graduated 3 so far. I have been doing this for over 18 years now. This is my 19th year homeschooling. So I've seen the before and after. I am the before and after. I think at this point I have actually made every single mistake that there is to make. And so I'm just telling you from my experience that the whole on-the-go schooling doesn't produce as good of results, at least not in my family. So that's my thoughts on that. I hope that I have not offended you to the point that you are now clicking off. If I haven't, there's still 3 more points, so we'll see. Constant curriculum switching. Okay, this is possibly the biggest overconsumption habit that we homeschool moms have. And at this point, it's almost like a rite of passage. If you're not switching something in your curriculum every year, are you even a homeschool mom? I feel like this trend started when homeschool conferences became the thing. I know I personally stopped going to homeschool conferences because if I went, I felt like I needed to switch to something else. It's, the shiny object syndrome. This is why when you meet a new homeschool mom, one of the first questions out of your mouth is generally, well, what curriculum do you use? And then the homeschool mom will tell you, and it will sound fantastic because she's only telling you the good parts, because she doesn't want to reveal that her homeschool is in shambles right now. So she's only telling you the good parts. And then you start questioning yourself. Oh, well, maybe we should try that. Or you go to the homeschool convention and, a lot of the seminars are being put on by the curriculum companies. Like literally representatives from the curriculum companies are telling you and trying to sell you on their curriculum while also telling you the top 3 ways to get your child reading earlier or something like that, right? It's all a sales pitch. And so you go there because you want to be encouraged and uplifted for another year of homeschooling. But what you come back with is $2,000 of new curriculum that seemed like a good idea at the time, but now you feel completely overwhelmed because you have to relearn how to teach a whole new curriculum, and your children are, getting whiplash from, going from Charlotte Mason to classical to unschooling, or, let's make some lap books. This is one of the top ways that well-meaning and diligent homeschool parents are still creating gaps in their children's education, is because you're hopping. And when I say you, I used to include myself, and I used to do this every single year, hopping from one curriculum to the other, to the other, to the other. And there's no continuity. There's no educational plan in place. And so you end up creating gaps, even if you are putting in the work, the daily work, doing all of the things that a diligent homeschool mother should be doing, requiring excellence of your children. But if you're curriculum hopping, not only are you wasting so much, curriculum is so expensive, even if you're buying it used every year, it's so expensive. so if you're hopping from curriculum to curriculum, you're wasting a lot of money. You're wasting so much time relearning how to teach something that you were teaching just fine last year, and then probably, unfortunately creating some gaps in your children's education. So I'm not a fan of curriculum hopping. Now, is it necessary sometimes? Yeah. Sometimes it really, really is. And there's no way to get out of it. And I've, developed a rubric for myself so that if I feel like, oh, well, maybe we really need to switch something up here, this is not working for this child, I have a rubric, that I put myself through, and I put my child through, basically, to tell me whether or not that's a good decision. Because I don't necessarily trust my judgment when, I'm super duper frustrated and my child is super duper frustrated and it feels like we're not actually making progress. But sometimes progress presents itself differently. So that's another one. That's a big one. I feel like probably this might be the biggest one for homeschool moms, is just switching curriculums. Number 4 is over-investing in tech. Now, I don't know if you know this about me yet, but I am not a very tech savvy mom. I mean, it took me like months and months and months just to get a microphone with a wire. It's not even, I'm not going to try and say what the wireless ones are called. I don't actually know. I'm not tech savvy, but I'm actually married to a man who is extraordinarily tech savvy. And so we have tech here. He is the department head for tech. And so he gets all of the old tech. They send it to us literally, and then he's to dispose of it. And sometimes we can buy it and get good deals. So like we have the tech, okay? But you do not need to become a family that has an iPad for each child, that has a laptop for each child. Your kids don't need their own device, not by any means. We have, let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 children enrolled in Memoria Academy, which is Memoria Press's online academy. So they each have separate devices specifically for their schoolwork, their online classes. And then my 2 4th graders have an online discussion class for literature. And so they borrow devices. But, we are a family. We don't do cell phones until driving now. We learned that lesson the hard way. Unfortunately, that was a hard lesson to learn. So we, have cut back on that. We absolutely do not do the whole, let's take the iPad to the restaurant thing. We're a family of, I have 11 kids. So we don't really go to the restaurant but a few times a year. But when we do, we are going to talk to each other. We do not take iPads. We don't give the kids phones in the waiting room of the dentist's office. We want our children to get bored. We want our children to understand how to entertain themselves. It's such a startling thing to go to a restaurant and see kids at all the tables with, their iPad and the pink or blue cover. And I don't know. I think it's really, that worries me. That worries me for our future. That, everybody has their own devices and everybody is spending so much time on that. So that is another huge overconsumption thing, that I would love to see the homeschool community as a whole just kind of turn their backs on. Paper and pencil is fantastic. Do our children need to learn how to type? Yeah, they do. Do our children need to learn how to use technology? Yeah, they do. But that doesn't mean that they need to start doing it at 6. They don't need to know how to use technology at the age of 6. That's ridiculous. So, I feel pretty strongly about that one. And that is another way that, not just homeschoolers in general, society as a whole is spending way too much money, way too many resources, way too much time. And time is money. Wasting time, that's overconsumption. It's overconsumption of media. And I would just love to see more people just draw a line and say, no, we're not doing that anymore. Curriculum as identity. Okay, this one is a little bit more nebulous. This is something that I've seen, homeschool moms kind of fall into, like, everybody needs a label. right? So, oh, well, what kind of homeschool mom are you? Oh, well, we're Charlotte Mason, or we unschool, or we're wild and free, or we're classical. Like everybody just needs a label. This is the label I would love to see homeschool moms start using for ourselves. I'm a successful homeschool mom. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be a successful homeschool mom? It means your children are learning. It means your children are becoming more and more prepared each year to be adults. It means that our children are learning to recognize truth, goodness, and beauty. Like actually learning the things. Like, are they getting better each year? Are they progressing in their math? Do they have to go as fast as the curriculum says? No, they don't. If they have some learning struggles, then, but are they progressing? Are they progressing through the material? Are they learning the things that they need to learn? That is really the only marker that we should use for ourselves. Like, am I Charlotte Masoning hard enough? I'm not a Charlotte Mason homeschooler, by the way. Whatever label you want to fill in there. That is actually not what should matter. Am I following the tenets of my favorite educational method? That's not what matters. What matters at the end of the day is your child learning? Are they thriving in their homeschool? Are they progressing through their skill levels? That is what I would love to see more moms talking about, and less talking about, the wonderful attributes of different methods. Like, is the method important? It's only important if your child is becoming more successful. So I don't know. I would love to see us move away from that and move more towards, is my child receiving an excellent education? Because at the end of the day, that's actually what matters. That's what matters to me. I want to make sure that I am doing the best job that I can possibly do for my children. And sometimes all of the extra stuff, making sure that you have like a beige homeschool room with perfect wooden like all of that stuff. You know what I'm talking about? The stuff you see on Instagram and the stuff that you see on Pinterest, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. But yeah, if you're spending all of your time like curating the perfect scene, but your children aren't actually learning anything, then that doesn't matter at all. So let's all focus. Listen, as moms, we have limited time, limited energy, limited sanity on some days. We should be focusing on what is most important. It's not most important that our children have the perfectly curated name tag. I saw today these name tags that were set on the table. I think there were 2 or 3 of them for the child. They were cute, like they were super cute. But it's like, why does your child need a name tag? You know your kids' names. I don't know. Like, I know some people really enjoy the craft aspect of all of this, but if you're spending all of your time doing that and you haven't even read the curriculum manual yet, that's not the best use of your time. And a lot of times that's why homeschooling probably seems so hard, is because we're focusing on the wrong things. We're prioritizing the wrong things, and this is weird. I don't like crafts in general, but I love cutting things out. And so I can convince myself that I am working on homeschool stuff when I'm just doing busy work, just cutting things out and punching holes in things and doing things that actually don't need to be done. So what I'm trying to say is make sure that the artsy craftsy stuff that makes it look Pinterest perfect, that should be done in your free time. That should not take priority over the actual lessons that go into homeschooling. And maybe you can balance that. Maybe you are doing both of those things. I know for me personally, when I do not want to do a hard thing, I'll usually distract myself with something that seems a lot easier instead of just doing the hard thing in the first place. That's kind of how my brain operates. So when I see a lot of these, overly curated and, overly artsy craftsy setups, I'm thinking to myself, what is she avoiding actually doing that seems hard? And I just want to take her hand and say, hey, let's sit down and figure it out together. Because homeschooling is hard. It's hard. It is hard work. It takes so much self-control and so much discipline to do it well. So when I see, the overly curated setup, I'm just thinking to myself, what is she avoiding doing that she's afraid of? She's afraid she's going to fail at something, and so she's doing something that she's really good at right now instead of doing the most important thing. So don't think that I'm judging you if you're posting pretty pictures. Really, I just want to come sit down with you and help you figure it out. Okay, so the truth is homeschools across the country are not collapsing because moms are choosing the wrong math book. Homeschools are collapsing because we are normalizing habits that are draining us. They are distracting us, and they are pulling us away from what truly matters and what will truly move the needle in our homeschools. You don't need more co-ops, more activities, more curriculum, or a new planner. You really just need a framework that keeps your homeschool moving forward day after day, week after week, year after year, even when it's hard, even when the kids are sick, even when you're sick. That's what you really need. That is what is going to create success in your homeschool. So again, if you are feeling stuck, this is why I created the Homeschool Rescue Plan. It's a 5-day challenge. It's free. You can get that in the description box below, and it will help you pinpoint exactly where you need to focus your efforts. I'll see you inside.